Order! Order! You are an incorrigible delinquent at times. Behave yourself, man!
Well, as the weekend approaches, you might be forgiven for hoping for some respite from Brexit, but not a bit of it, I'm afraid. In Nottinghamshire, the March to Leave strides on, and in London tomorrow, a large crowd against Brexit is expected, boosted possibly by an online petition for Parliament to debate revoking Article 50. That's attracted over 3.5 million signatures and counting. So many, in fact, that the website crashed. But caution is demanded, say some, as the technology may be open to abuse. Well, joining me now is Mike Galsworthy, a behavioural genetics doctor and pro-EU activist, and by Stephen Edgington, who's chief digital strategist at the pro-Brexit campaign Leave Means Leave. Mike Galsworthy first. I mean, the petition, yes, large number of signatures, but is it sound and fury really signifying nothing?
No, it's very important. This is the fastest growing government petition ever. So this really signals a change in mood as well, because you've got the big march coming up tomorrow, which a lot of people will be on, but that's about a people's vote. This is the grassroots and then wider society saying, we're done with Brexit, actually, just bin the lot, we've had enough.
Stephen Edgington?
I mean, this petition, as you say, it's the sort of largest growing petition in history. 17.4 million people was the largest democratic mandate in British history. And the fact that so many people are trying to subvert the will of the people, ignore democracy, ignore 52% of the country, I think it's an absolute travesty that people think that they are so, I mean, they're so arrogant that they think, it doesn't matter what the people think, let's just revoke Brexit because they're all stupid and they don't really know what they're talking about. We don't even need a second vote.
You're arrogant.
No, not really. And it's not just me that signed that petition a lot of times, it's a lot of other people.
But not as many as the 17.4 million who voted to leave.
Of
course, that was an actual vote, not just ticking a thing on the
that was a
computer.
big campaign where there was 17 million versus 16 million, so 1 in 17 would make the difference, and that was 3 years ago. But now you've got to compare like with like. So we've got this petition, which has got 3.5 million in 2 days, and there's no petition for Theresa May's deal, and there is a petition for crashing out, and that's got about, what, under 400,000. So if you're comparing like with like about public sentiment right now, then that's where public sentiment is driving it. And if you want to know how this translates across the nation, well, then you can just poll it, because people have polled it. Would you like Remain or Theresa May's deal? Look, Remain wins hands down. Would you like Remain or crashing out? Remain wins hands down.
That's totally rubbish. We do our own polling and it shows the complete opposite. People want no deal. But back to the point.
Just justify that for a minute. People want no deal?
So the polling that we did this week with Comres showed that people preferred to leave with no deal rather than extending Article 50 after Theresa May's deal was crashed out. I mean, 69% of Leave voters want to go with no deal rather than extending Article 50, which was at 15%. But let me get back to the point. You're right, a lot of people have signed this petition, including me tonight. I signed it 3 times from the names Donald Tusk, Jean-Claude Juncker and Michel Barnier. It's so open to abuse. I used 3 fake emails. I did it within 5 minutes. I mean, you're right.
And you feel proud of that, do you?
I don't feel proud of that. I think that these petitions are so easily abused. So many fake signatures are on these petitions. Now, that doesn't even matter. 3.5 million people compared to 17.4 million people. It's pretty clear to show which one's more. I mean, we're talking about democracy. We're not talking about online petitions. They're totally irrelevant to the democratic system. You've got to be looking at the actual vote in 2016. We haven't even delivered it, and now you're saying revoke it.
It is true, it's open to abuse, this petition. It's been hijacked by bots and people like Stephen here.
So there was a whole load of bots from 4chan that were trying to take the petition down and snarl it up.
So the online
those don't actually get through to the signatures because they don't get through to people actually clicking through, and then there's a whole clean-up process. It just means that more people would have signed if they'd been able to get access. So we've been monitoring that from our social media intelligence unit. As to the argument about democracy, this is fundamental. What is democracy? What's it for? It's the ability of the public to ditch politicians when they are no longer good and ditch policies when they are no longer good. So how does the public start to signal that to our petitions? It's marches like the one tomorrow and petitions like the one taking off now.
Here's how democracy works. The British people are given a vote. We vote for something and it gets delivered. For the first time in British history, we voted against the establishment. The establishment has been spending the last 2.5 years trying to reverse democracy, trying to reverse Brexit. You are part of that establishment. 3.5 million people think the people are so stupid. They're so pointless in our democracy. Do you think that you can just ignore all those people, 52% of the country, and simply revoke what those people voted for? Now, that is a disgrace, that is arrogant, that is snobbery. These people, I mean, almost all of these people who signed this petition are in London. If you actually go around the country speaking to
That's not true. Everyone can have a look at that.
OK,
Everyone can look at
but
that.
you know what? Your point about people are in London signing
Yeah.
this petition. What about the march to leave? You must be a little bit disappointed with the numbers. I mean, fewer
Not at all.
than 100
Not at
from
all.
this march from Sunderland
Not
to
at all.
London.
You know, the Remain campaign, the People's Vote campaign, tomorrow they're doing their Westminster walk from Park Lane to Parliament Square. We're doing a 300-mile march from Sunderland to London. Now,
So what
I
has
don't
more
expect...
impact? Fewer than 100 marching hundreds
Well,
of miles,
first of all, it's not
or
fewer than
hundreds of
100.
thousands marching 2 miles?
Well, one would hope that those people who are on that march to leave from Sunderland to London, 300 miles, as you say, they represent millions of people across the country. They are taking 2 weeks out of their lives. Some of them are giving up jobs, some of them are giving up holidays, some of them even flown in from abroad, from Thailand, to give up 2 weeks of their lives to march for democracy. The people tomorrow on the People's Vote March, they are doing their Westminster walk from Park Lane to Parliament Square, 38-minute walk. They can't obviously be bothered to do this 300-mile thing themselves.
We'll have to
but they're
debate
marching
that
against
tomorrow.
democracy.
Stephen and Mike Galsworthy, thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you.
A very good evening. Their message is put it to the people, and today tens of thousands of demonstrators took that sentiment to the streets of London. Organisers claim 1 million anti-Brexit protesters joined their People's Vote March in the centre of the capital, many calling for a second EU referendum. Well, Leave campaigners used the day to spread their pro-Brexit message too via a march near Nottingham. Meanwhile, it's thought the Prime Minister has spent the weekend in her countryside residence of Chequers after telling MPs they may not be voting on her deal for a third time if it doesn't have enough support. Our home editor, Jason Farrell, reports from the march in London.
A swarm of bodies filled central London. This, the biggest protest the capital has seen since the rally against the Iraq War. They want another referendum on the UK's decision to leave the EU.
What do we want? People's vote! When do we want it? Now!
I want Theresa May and the government to see us, to notice us, because she keeps talking about the people have spoken, and I feel completely unlistened to.
This is a divided country. One of the ways we could come back together is by having a proper debate about it again.
Think it would lead to more division, another referendum, another big question to the people.
I don't think talking about the issues can lead to more division. Talking about it is the way we resolve it in this country, and that's democracy, isn't it?
What do you say that 52% of people voted to leave? 52%, well, a percentage of that 52% was sold apart. They didn't know what Brexit was. Even now, no one knows what Brexit is.
You haven't worked it out yet?
Oh, I've worked it out. It's a mess.
We were supposed to be leaving the EU next Friday, but with Parliament refusing to back the Prime Minister's negotiated withdrawal agreement, uncertainty continues to reign. Next week, MPs are expected to be given the chance to indicate what they think should happen next.
We've already had votes on all of these things. They've all been rejected, all these Norway options, customs union options. We've discussed these things ad nauseam, actually. And at the end of the day, the only votes that matter are the vote of the people to leave in the referendum.
You couldn't imagine Nicola Sturgeon getting this reception in London if she was here to express her views on Scottish independence. Politicians from all spectrums came to the stage, perhaps most significant Labour's deputy leader, who said he'd support May's deal on one condition.
I can only vote for a deal if you let the people vote on it too.
Tom Watson backing a people's vote when Jeremy Corbyn remains undecided. These protesters know the Labour leader is crucial to achieve their objective.
17 million people voted to leave. It's argued that the 2016 vote was decisive and the will of the people. But here are around about 1 million people who've given up their Saturday, and they've come out to say that they feel that that will may have changed and they want it put back to the test.
However, in Beeston, a group of pro-Brexit campaigners gathered outside a pub to counter claims that anything had changed in how the British public feels about the EU.
This is now a battle of people versus the politicians. For the first time in the history of our great country, we have a parliament ignoring the will of the people. It's a betrayal, it's a total disgrace.
Both sides agree on one thing: the government has failed. This was the London protesters' reaction as they passed Downing Street. But Theresa May wasn't there. She's in Chequers, contemplating her next move. amid speculation that it may be calling time on her leadership if she can't get her deal through next week. Jason Farrell, Sky News.
Let's speak to our political correspondent, Lewis Goodall. He's been out with marches today, joins us from central London this evening. Lewis, the Prime Minister, of course, in checkers, as Jason was saying in his report there. Do you think she'll be taking much notice of this protest today?
No, well, I don't think so, but mind you, Theresa May has got some other things to consider this weekend. She's holed up in Chequers, her country retreat, I think seriously mulling the prospect of what she's going to do next and whether in the next few days, the next week or so, she might be forced to tender her resignation, something that lots of people here would dearly like, but then on the other hand, perhaps they should be careful for what they wish for, because of course if Theresa May goes, she's almost guaranteed to be replaced by someone from the ERG, that group of hardline Tory Brexiters, and probably someone who's committed to a harder Brexit or indeed no deal whatsoever. But leaving that to one side, in many ways, this march, which could well be 1 million strong, we can never be absolutely certain, but there were an enormous number of people here today, people who did come from all over the country. I've heard it said that some people say, oh, this is just Londoners. It wasn't. I spoke to people from north, south, east and west, from the depths of Cornwall up to the Lake District, to the far north of Scotland. But nonetheless, these people, I think, are really aiming their message not so much at Theresa May, who I don't really think they expect to listen, but maybe to that other political leader of the major parties of this country, Jeremy Corbyn, because of course Jeremy Corbyn, who has had to try and balance the competing interests between the Leave Labour bit of his coalition and the more populist majority Remainer bit of his coalition. He's had to try and balance that for a long time. And the people here want him to receive the message loud and clear that if at any point during this parliamentary deadlock, this impasse to which we've become so accustomed, if at any point it looks like over the course of the next week, he might be able to break that by embracing a people's vote, a second referendum, whatever you want to call it, on May's deal, then he should embrace it. And indeed, in that context, extremely interesting, not to see Jeremy Corbyn here, but Tom Watson, the Deputy Labour Party leader, saying that he wants to see a ratification referendum on May's deal, and he would give the Prime Minister his vote and probably a whole chunk of Labour MPs' votes as well to do so. That would put Jeremy Corbyn in a difficult position. It could be tantalising for Theresa May. Theoretically, on that basis, she could get her deal through, subject to a referendum. It would require, though, a great deal of political agility on her part, a character trait, from which Theresa May has shown time and time again she is sorely lacked.
OK, Lewis, thanks very much.
So there hasn't been any independent verification of the numbers, but the organisers of the Put It to the People demonstration said more than 1 million people took part. The march ended in Parliament Square with the unusual spectacle of a former Conservative Deputy Prime Minister addressing an adoring crowd of placard-waving protesters. Simon Israel was there.
There may never be an exact figure, but today's call for a people's vote took over central London. The vast majority were Remain voters, but angry, frustrated and despairing ones. At one stage, the demonstration from end to end was 2 miles long.
There are hundreds of thousands of people here. It may be the largest people's demonstration ever. It might nudge the debate. In 2003, Tony Blair dismissed a similar-sized anti-Iraq war demonstration as misguided. The question today, 16 years on, is whether, in the face of such numbers, Theresa May can do the same.
What do we want? People's vote! When do we want it? Now!
The message was clear, even if there were doubts about its ultimate effect.
Think this is going to make any difference?
I mean, probably not, but I mean, I really hope it does. Yeah, I don't really know. People power is probably the only thing we have left, so we'll give it a good go. If not, I'll see if I can get a Estonian passport or something like that.
As you can see, 12 of them, and they're the future of this country, and they need the opportunity to actually go and live and work in Europe.
I don't want to leave the EU because I want a better future, and I don't want to be out of the EU because I don't like Brexit.
Why?
Because then we won't have a connection with the EU and lots of people won't be able to come and work here and stuff. And apparently we'll have a lot less money.
What does it feel to be British
in the current climate?
I'm ashamed. It's a shambles. I am absolutely disgusted with the state of things. And I do, whenever we do meet people abroad, I do try and say, look, I'm sorry, I didn't vote for this. And I'm very cross indeed about the whole thing.
Leave, Kings, leave!
Equally as cross, although less visible, were a couple of hundred marchers 140 miles away, protesting not for a second vote, but to one of the first.
It is an outright betrayal, because Mrs May now tells us we're not leaving next Friday, despite telling us over 100 times that we would be, despite putting a piece of law in place supported by 500 MPs that said we would be.
Another absentee from London's huge protest was the Labour leader Jeremy Corbyn. It was left to the party's deputy leader Tom Watson to make the case for another vote.
Well, have a look out of your window, Prime Minister. Open your curtains. Turn on the television. Look at this magnificent crowd today. Here are the people.
Next week we'll see what impressions, if any, today's protests will leave. All sides appear entrenched, with the Prime Minister's Brexit policy and her future hanging by a thread, as Lord Heseltine warned today's audience.
I may be naive, but if something is wrong, I look first at the person in charge.
A Pinocchio effigy of that person was at today's march, symbolic perhaps for the many who came of a breakdown in trust.
Well, the Labour MP Liz Kendall, who was on that march, is in Westminster and joins me now. Liz Kendall, the day after the EU referendum, you said to the 52% of people who voted leave, we hear you. You're not listening to them today, are you?
I don't agree with that at all. I know that people voted to leave for many different reasons, but the deal that Theresa May has put forward isn't what they were promised. And, you know, it's a worse deal than we've got now. And the truth is, it doesn't solve Brexit. It actually means the uncertainty is going to go on forever. And, you know, I have slowly come to the view that the only way we're going to get out of this mess is to put it back to the people. As my friend, the MP for Sedgefield, Phil Wilson, says, it started with the people, it's going to have to end with the people.
OK. Sorry to interrupt you. This call for a referendum is really about remaining in the EU. So why not honestly campaign for that instead of just campaigning for a mechanism that gets us there?
Well, if we do get a vote on whatever Parliament agrees as the Brexit deal, then I would campaign for Remain. But, you know, we have to find a way out of this mess. And what was so positive and hopeful about today's march is that there is a solution, which is to put Theresa May's deal to the public in a vote. As Tom Watson, our deputy leader, said today, if she were to agree to that, we'd let her agreement go through. So we have to find a way out. And I think it is right in principle that people are given a say, because what is on offer now is so very different from what was promised in 2016.
The Mayor of London has said that he now favours revoking Article 50. I believe 4 million people have signed this petition. Do you agree with them and do you agree with him?
I would rather that we didn't end up having to revoke Article 50 to stop a no-deal Brexit, which I do think would be really risky and damaging for the country. Because, as I say, ultimately, it is the people of this country who have to decide, look, you were promised Brexit, you were promised all sorts of things about it, here is the reality of what's on offer, do you want to do that or stick with the deal we currently have? So that, I think, is by far the best way forward.
So what should the question be? What sort of referendum do you favour?
I think whatever deal Parliament ends up agreeing, whether it's Theresa May's deal, whether it's a customs union, whether it's a sort of Norway-type arrangement, or indeed if it was a Canada free trade deal, that should be put to the people, because at least now we know the facts, the reality and what it really is. Because you will remember all of this, Fatima, that at the time people were promised we could leave and have all the same benefits, that we held all the cards, that we'd have 40 trade deals done the minute that we left, and none of that has turned out to be true. So put the reality of Brexit back to the public to see if that's what they really want.
Is there any form of Brexit that you would accept? Your colleagues, Lucy Powell and Stephen Kinnock, are pushing a softer, so-called Norway option. Could you get behind that?
Yes, if it's put to the public. You know, I think Brexit has always been a choice between staying as close as possible in the single market and customs union to protect jobs and prevent a hard border in Ireland, but giving up our say over the rules, or cutting all ties and with all the risks and uncertainty that brings. Those are the inevitable choices about Brexit. And I think we have to be honest in Parliament and with the public about that and say, this is the reality. Which one do you want, or do you want to stick with what we've got?
OK, just very quickly, are you disappointed that your leader, Jeremy Corbyn, wasn't there with you today?
Yes, I mean, I would have liked him to have been there in every Labour MP. It was really important for me to see Tom Watson there, rightly making the case that the only way out of this mess is going to be to give it to the public, and also, you know, challenging the Prime Minister, who has tried to pit Parliament against the public. Look, I don't think everybody in the country agrees with what the people here on this march think. I would never dream of saying there is one public with one view that remains the same over time. There are different people with different opinions, and in Parliament we are grappling with these very difficult decisions. We are trying to do our best and represent our constituents.
Thanks very much. Liz Kendall, thank you.
Organisers of a march in London today to demand another EU referendum claim that more than 1 million people have taken part. It comes after EU leaders agreed to delay Brexit and after Theresa May wrote to MPs suggesting that she may abandon attempts to put her Brexit deal to a third vote in Parliament. Our political correspondent Ian Watson has this report.
Brexit is at a crossroads. No support yet for Theresa May's deal, but no agreed alternative.
Hey, Theresa May, give us all that final say.
The organisers claim that 1 million people took to London's streets to call for a new referendum. The People's Vote campaign say this would bring the country together. But so far, Brexit has caused the big political parties to splinter, and opponents of another public vote say it would only deepen divisions.
Some people are worried it would be very divisive given the state of the country.
And it's not now.
We weren't told what Brexit would actually look like because they didn't know what Brexit would actually look like. And I think now we actually know what Brexit might be, we should be able to make an informed decision.
And we want to have another referendum so people can voice their latest view, I think.
Would you accept other options, a softer Brexit, some people call it?
I think anything's better than the current option of either Theresa's deal or no deal.
I bring with me today solidarity from Scotland.
The SNP and most opposition leaders at Westminster have publicly pledged their support for a new referendum. Jeremy Corbyn isn't here, but has said it's an option the Labour leadership will vote for in Parliament. And the party's deputy leader says he could back Theresa May's deal, but with a rather large and important caveat.
I will help you get it over the line to prevent a disastrous no-deal-let Brexit. But I can only vote for a deal if you let the people vote on it too.
Theresa May isn't yet confident enough to guarantee that she'll bring her deal back to Parliament for a further vote next week. And campaigners here hope that will give them an opportunity to push their case for a new referendum. But that decision won't be taken by thousands of people on the streets. It will be taken by fewer than 650 MPs. And so far, they've resisted all calls for a public vote. MPs are likely to discuss alternatives to Theresa May's deal next week. Some want a closer relationship with the European Union, similar to Norway. Others back a more distant free trade agreement, like Canada's. And some say no deal could still be the best option. But these campaigners are being accused by long-standing Leave supporters of trying to stop Brexit altogether.
This march pretends to be in favour of a second referendum, but that is only a means to an end. This is a march to try and stop Brexit, to reverse the decision that the majority took in 2016.
Parliament is still in deadlock over Theresa May's deal. It's still not clear how or exactly when the UK will leave the EU. And campaigners here are hoping that politicians can still be persuaded to give that decision back to the people.
And Ian joins me now here in the studio. And Ian reports tonight that the Prime Minister is under growing pressure from her own party.
That's right, Ben. The Prime Minister still isn't in position to bring her own deal back to Parliament to ask for another vote. She's worried that that will not get through next week. So that's obviously fuelled speculation about her own position. I've been speaking to senior Conservative MPs tonight, and some of them have told me that they've told her to her face that she needs to stand down or announce that she'll stand down soon after her deal is passed if she's to have any hope of taking control of the agenda next week. One idea that's being floated is actually that she resigns as party leader but stays on as Prime Minister through the remaining Brexit process so that a leadership contest can be announced. But again, another senior MP has said to me tonight, look, this will not be enough to get this unpopular deal through anyway, so she may as well just dig in. But she is on the verge of losing further control of the Brexit process in Parliament this week. A cross-party group of backbench MPs are pushing for alternatives to her deal to be debated. That's likely to happen on Wednesday. Government sources think those backbench MPs will win. So we could have the prospect this week of seeing the Prime Minister still in office, but not really in power.
Ian, thank you. Ian Watson there, our political correspondent.
Organisers claim 1 million people marched through the capital today demanding a second referendum on Theresa May's Brexit plan. Most appear to be Remainers. But despite the huge turnout, it seems unlikely the Prime Minister has already ruled out a so-called people's vote. Our political correspondent David Wood reports.
They want another say and believe the country's changed its mind on Brexit.
3, 2, 1.
They came in their thousands with one simple message.
We think Brexit's a total nightmare and yeah, we want to stop it.
We're better off in than out. Why have you come all the way from Newcastle for this today?
Right, to support the anti-Brexit movement. I think Brexit is a disastrous idea.
It's so important that we be in the EU. Things were working out quite well as they were.
What makes you confident that we would vote in a different way this time?
Because it's a total mess. The way that the Tory party's gone about it.
Very, very upset, angry.
Do you think another vote would solve that?
I think it would. I think people would say, well, OK, that's it. However it goes, we'll go with it, yes.
So you would accept whatever the result would be?
Yes, I would accept the result, yes.
And also here to have their voices heard are those who were too young to vote in the 2016 referendum and say they deserve their say now.
What would you say to the people who say we had a vote less than 3 years ago and that was to leave the European Union?
3 years ago, I was 17 3/4. I'm now 20 and a bit. I didn't get a vote. This is going to really define my whole life.
I was too young to vote, and I think so much has changed since then. I think we really, the only way we're going to get through this chaos, the only way we're going to get anything out of this is to put it back to the people.
There is a real optimism on the streets of the capital today that now is the time to push for a second referendum or a people's vote, with Parliament in deadlock less than a week before our original planned EU departure. But of course, until now, Parliament has rejected a second referendum.
So too has Theresa May, the cause of boos and jeers as they march past number 10.
Let the people take control.
Many here hope Labour's deputy leader joining the cause is a sign the country is coming round to a second vote.
Last March we had 5 vote coaches down from Yorkshire. This time we've got 20. I think that shows the strength of feeling. And in Wakefield it was 63% leave. I'd say it's 50-50 now and falling fast.
But in Nottingham, another march, heading for London next week, calling for our EU departure on Friday.
I think the genie's out of the bottle, and I think if there was another referendum, I don't want one, if there was another referendum, I think we win it by a much bigger margin.
What do we want? People's vote!
But on the other side of the argument, an online petition calling on politicians to stop our EU exit altogether has become the most signed ever. But the reality is, unless Parliament ever agrees with these people, there will be no second referendum.
And David, dramatic developments for the Prime Minister tonight.
Yeah, a number of tomorrow's newspapers reporting a cabinet coup to replace her with a temporary Prime Minister, although there is no consensus on who that should be. What is clear tonight, though, is that discipline within her party is at a very low ebb. I've spoken to a number of backbench MPs who've told her to her face this week that she should resign, particularly if she wants to get her Brexit deal through. Well, the Prime Minister has spent some time today out campaigning ahead of the local elections, but most of it has been spent having meetings meetings about that Brexit deal. She wants to be able to get it through Parliament next week. If she can't, well, it looks like Parliament will again try and take control of the whole Brexit process. Now, this is a Prime Minister, I think, who is under pressure like never before and has very, very few allies. But don't forget, she has a reputation for surviving the unsurvivable.
Indeed, David, thank you.